Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to talk to you guys a little bit about time under tension and Gainzzz. I had a subscriber ask just a little bit ago, hey, could you talk a little bit about time under tension and Gainzzz? And I told him I've already talked a lot about this. But then I realized, I need to get a second informative video up for the day, and I don't think I've mentioned this in a few months. I bet you I haven't made a video on this in 6 months. So let's talk about it, because this is an overhyped concept that if you look at it at its core principle, it's actually true. The problem is that when people extrapolate it out to other nonsense, and there's 3 different types of nonsense they extrapolate it to, it isn't true. So does time under tension equal more Gainzzz? Yeah, absolutely. And here's what I mean. If you say bench press, or you incline bench press, it doesn't have to be flat bench, it could be incline bench for those who seem to think that incline's better for their aesthetics. Let's say that you incline bench 225 for 3 reps. If you do 4 reps, you have more time under tension with that weight. You did more work, you get more gain from it. What happens when you get to 6 reps, 8 reps, 10 reps? If you can do 10 reps with that, you're going to get pretty good gains, especially compared to when you were doing less work with that same weight. Back when you were only doing 3 reps, yeah. What happens when you get to where you can do 3 sets of 10 with that? With a weight that used to be your 3 rep max, now you're still using the same weight, but that's 10 times as much time under tension in the same workout, over 3 times the amount in the same set. You've done an enormous amount of work with that weight. The amount of time you have loaded the muscles under that weight, the amount of fatigue you've induced with that weight has all increased dramatically. You're probably going to get very significant amounts of muscle growth from that. I can assure you that if your incline bench is 225 for 3 and you build up to where you can do 3 sets of 10 with that weight on an incline, your entire chest, shoulder structure, triceps, everything are going to get considerably bigger, very noticeably so. So in that regard, if we understand time under tension is simply doing more work with the same amount of weight, that is absolutely a powerful driver of hypertrophy and overall gains. And I don't think anyone who's ever studied sports science in any capacity is going to disagree with that. It is. The problem is that when people extrapolate it out to 3 other things, what other things do people talk about when they bring up time under tension? See, they try to take something as a simple concept as workload, which we know for an absolute fact that workload has a direct and proportionate contribution to inducing muscle growth. We know that. That's no longer a point of contention in exercise science. In other words, the more work you do, the more gains you're probably going to get if that work is of sufficient intensity to reach an assortment of threshold of muscle fibers, right? Fatiguing upper threshold muscle fibers and the muscle fibers that are most conducive to growth will make you get bigger. No debate about that. So work equals size, right? Work equals size. The problem is that when people draw it out to, what are the 3 things they try to say? If you move the weight more slowly on the positive or the negative, or you have continual tension. See, people will mix these 3 topics up with time under tension, and I'm going to be honest with you. The scientific evidence that any of those 3 things have any meaningful contribution to muscle growth is virtually non-existent. Here's what I mean. Concentric reps. A lot of people say, well, if you move the weight more slowly, it's more difficult. As far as lifting, for those who don't know what the concentric is, moving the weight away from gravity. In other words, the bench press, the part where you're pushing the bar away from your chest, is a concentric. The squat is where you're squatting the weight away from the floor. In other words, lifting it, not lowering it. In other words, lifting the weight, not controlling the negative. That's the concentric rep. Well, here's what we know. In a collective we. I'm not talking about me specifically. We, those of us who have studied in any way exercise science or the human body or human physiology, we know that the more slowly you move a weight, the less upper threshold muscle fibers you reach with the same weight. That in fact, the best way to reach the highest upper threshold fibers is to accelerate a weight as quickly as you can while maintaining good form. Because that's the key there. You're not talking about swinging and cheating a weight. We're talking about exploding a weight. In other words, more explosive muscle fibers, which have their own growth potential, it's easier to get through the rate coding of those muscle fibers if you move a weight as quickly as you can while maintaining strict form. In other words, moving it fast, but not so fast that you have to cheat to do so, where you're in control of the weight, complete control of the weight, with the muscles that you're trying to lift it with. If you move it more quickly, you reach more upper threshold muscle fibers earlier in a set with a lighter weight. In other words, with your 8 rep max, it might take you the 4th or 5th or 6th rep in some cases to reach those upper threshold fibers. But if you accelerate the weight quickly enough from the first rep, you might start reaching them on the 1st or 2nd rep. So moving the weight more quickly actually is more beneficial for muscle fiber recruitment. It's better for overall growth potential, and it's definitely better for overall strength. The next thing that people will bring up is the lowering the weight slowly. Well, there's plenty of data to suggest that eccentric reps have their place in the toolbox for building muscle growth. They're beneficial to gains. They're not necessary. If you do enough concentric work, eccentric loading actually doesn't do anything extra for muscle growth. You can reach maximum growth potential without doing negatives at all, but they are very useful tools. Controlled negatives definitely have a strong growth stimulating effect on the body. They do. The problem is that what we found is that there is no benefit in any lab study done of which I am aware, or at least a consensus of them, that shows it's doing even a 4-second lowering produces a single drop more muscle growth than a 1-second controlled rep. In other words, as long as you have the rep under control, you gain the benefits of an eccentric rep as far as your gains go. Now, there are exercises in which you don't want an eccentric rep, but that's a different topic, isn't it? There are exercises where too much eccentric work will actually impede your recovery and hurt your progress in the long term. But that's obviously not every exercise, and so we're not talking about every lift out there, and that's a topic for a different video. So controlled negatives usually take about 1 second. Meaning if it takes you full, unless it's a really long lift, like a barbell squat, if you're 6 foot tall, could be more than a second to lower it under control. But if you're talking about a bench press, a row, a curl, those exercises, they don't have a super long range of motion. About 1 second on the way down will give you all the growth stimulation you're going to get from an eccentrics. But people will say, but you get more time under tension if you do 3 seconds or 4 seconds or 8 seconds on the way down. Yeah, you do get more time under tension. But this is an example of where time under tension does absolutely nothing for your gains, nothing at all. It does make you more sore, but it doesn't give you any more muscle growth. It's a waste of time. So if this is how they're defining time under tension, it isn't important at all. It doesn't help you in any way. And then the other area is that they'll talk about continual tension. Continual tension. Meaning you skip the top and bottom of a rep, or you don't pause at the top or the bottom so that you keep continual tension on a muscle. And be like, well, all these pro bodybuilders do it. No, pro bodybuilders do it because someone convinced these guys there was merit to it. And just because they got big, I can assure you, most of those guys you're thinking of probably got really, really big because number one, they lift weights. Number two, they're genetic freaks. And number three, they pen 2 grams of testosterone every week, a gram of trenbolone every week, 8 to 10 units of human growth hormone every day, and 100 to 300 micrograms of IGF-1 every day. I can assure you that was a much, much larger factor in them having massive biceps than continual tension was. And the fact that they probably pin synthol in their biceps if all those drugs and curls don't make them big enough. I can tell you right now, those are bigger factors. What do the experts say on continual tension? All right. What did Dr. Mike Israetel say on it last year? and he is a bodybuilder who happens to have a PhD in exercise science. He said that there's no evidence at all that continual tension contributes in any way to muscle growth. Nothing. He's never seen one shred of evidence in his entire professional career. Furthermore, I believe he said he can't even imagine a scenario in which it would. In other words, there's no mechanism in the body of which we are aware by which this would even cause muscle growth. There's no hypothetical method by which it would induce muscle growth. It's just something some guys in a magazine made up years ago and just said, hey, I think this will work, with no basis at all on anything other than they just came up with it. So if there's no evidence that it works, and we know that doing the terminal ranges of an exercise has its own growth potential, that variation or form of time under tension has no merit either. So at the end of the day, when people use time under tension and they act like it's a big deal, do you want to know what it is? If you want to use it in any meaningful context, it's just a fancy way of saying doing more work. That's it. That's all it means. Doing more work. More reps or more sets or more volume with the same amount of weight will give you more muscle growth. And that is actually true. Alright guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.